Welcome to this revision video based on the poem Cousin Kate. But before we start, let's take some thought then over what life was really like in the Middle Ages.
Life in a medieval village depended on someone's class and role in society. Generally speaking, though, the medieval village was the domain of the peasant. Peasants were the lowest class of society, but they actually made up the majority of the entire population. For this majority, the village was the center of their universe. They were born, lived, worked, attended church, were married, had children, and died, all within the same area. Today, we might imagine a medieval village as a line, square, or several little rows of houses, with a tavern and a church. But the medieval village actually took on many forms. It could be several houses clustered together, but a village could also be several scattered hamlets and farmsteads, far apart but under the control of a lord. Most villages would have been houses concentrated around a lord's manor, that is, an administrative device by which a lord charged rents and taxes from peasants. By far the most common villager was the serf. Serfs were the lowest class of peasants, and owed fealty to the lord of the manor. Though they were legally free, therefore being different from slaves, they were nevertheless legally bound to the land where they lived and worked, and they were not allowed to move away. The lord of the manor would barely, if ever, be in the village. Instead, he would be away fighting in wars or performing acts of royal service.
So as you can see, the world of Cousin Kate there is a place where the lord was a distant entity, whereas the maidens or servants would spend most of their time in the village, hardly ever able to escape. Welcome then to this revision video to Cousin Kate by Christina Rossetti. Once again, we'll be looking at what you're assessed for. On the left, we have what the poem's about and providing a sensitive and evaluative approach. The middle column there is its language and structure and how these create different effects for the reader. And lastly, we have our knowledge of the time the poem was written and indeed the poet herself. And that's, I guess, where our introductory video fits in. Let's take a little closer look then at Christina Rossetti. Rossetti wrote the poem during the Victorian era, 1837 to 1901, a time where women's sexual purity and reputation were crucial to her social standing. Rossetti was deeply influenced by her Anglo-Catholic faith. She often explored ideas of sin, redemption, and morality in her poetry. Rossetti wasn't really a feminist in the modern sense. She questioned the roles and limitations placed on women, however. Cousin Kate critiques how women were often objectified and discarded by powerful men, such as the Lord in our opening video.
Despite facing personal struggles, including battles with the Graves' disease and unrequited love, Rossetti's faith and resilience infused her poetry with a sense of hope and transcendence. Rossetti's writing was deeply influenced by her devout Christian faith, her experiences of love and loss, and her keen observations of the natural world. Her poetry often explored themes of love, death, redemption, and the passage of time. As a Victorian woman poet, she navigated the constraints of gender and societal expectations, using her poetry as a means of self-expression and empowerment. Despite the challenges, her poetry goes beyond the limitations of her era, speaking to universal themes and enduring truths that continue to resonate with readers across generations.
This is what you might picture when you think of the Middle Ages. The days of knights protecting castles and defending the honor of damsels in distress. While tales of chivalry were often just legend, for most girls and women in medieval times, distress, hardship, pain, and suffering was a historical fact of life. Those born into noble families had easier lives than those born as peasants or serfs. But all females were considered inferior to males by nature and by law. Laws were set by lords and kings and by the male heads of the Roman Catholic Church, a powerful influence on society in the Middle Ages. Women were taught to obey men, their fathers, and after they married, their husbands. The prime primary job opportunity for most women was to have and raise children. Girls were often married by age 14 and had their first baby by age 15. Medical knowledge and care was crude. Dying while giving birth was the most common cause of death in young women.
As you can see, Rossetti felt really passionately about the way women had been treated over the ages, and felt it was really important to write a poem that highlighted this, that it wasn't just the Victorian times where women mistreated, this has been happening for centuries and centuries beforehand.
This is what
Let's now hear the poem itself as read to you.
Cousin Kate. I was a cottage maiden, hardened by sun and air, contented with my cottage mates, not mindful I was fair. Why did a great lord find me out and praise my flaxen hair? Why did a great lord find me out to fill my heart with care? He lured me to his palace home, woes me for joy thereof, to lead a shameless, shameful life, his plaything and his love. He wore me like a silken knot, he changed me like a glove. So now I moan, an unclean thing, who might have been a dove. O Lady Kate, my cousin Kate, you grew more fair than I. He saw you at your father's gate, chose you, and cast me by. He watched your steps along the lane, your work among the rye. He lifted you from mean estate to sit with him on high. Because you were so good and pure, he bound you with his ring. The neighbors call you good and pure, call me an outcast thing. Even so I sit and howl in dust, you sit in gold and sing. Now which of us has tenderer heart? You had the stronger wing. Oh, cousin Kate, my love was true, your love was writ in sand. If he had fooled not me but you, if you stood where I stand, he'd not have won me with his love, nor bought me with his land. I would have spit into his face, and not have taken his hand. Yet I've a gift you have not got, and seem not like to get. For all your clothes and wedding ring, I've little doubt you fret. My fair-haired son, my shame, my pride, cling closer, closer yet. Your father would give lands for one to wear his coronet.
There we hear then the poem Cousin Kate, set from the point of view of a fair maiden who was once with the county lord, who was then replaced by her cousin, Kate. The lord seemingly think this cousin Kate was a better option for him, but little did he know that the speaker has what he treasures the most above all his land and titles. She has given birth to him a son, something he would otherwise not have. Now let's look at each part of the poem. We begin by looking at the start, then we're going to move to the middle of the poem, and then the end of the poem. Round the outside, you'll see notes on it that I'd like you to take note of as we go through. So the poem starts with a compound noun emphasising the speaker's working class status and humble background, simply a cottage maiden. Hardened by sun and air suggests she lived a life of physical labour outdoors, reinforcing her natural, unrefined existence. The word hardened also implies resilience or toughness from the experiences she's had. She repeats the word why, emphasising the speaker's confusion, regret and disruption of her peaceful life. He lured me at the beginning of stanza 2 suggests a predator, that the Lord is something devious, something that can't be trusted, suggesting manipulation and entrapment. The speaker was not a willing participant, but was coaxed or tricked into entering the Lord's world. The juxtaposition between woe and joy in stanza 2 creates emotional contradiction. She once saw the relationship with the Lord as something wonderful, something joyous, bring her money and happiness. But now, of course, it's a source of deep sorrow. The poem deliberately structurally uses a regular quatrain, that is, lines of 4 lines, and an A-B rhyme scheme, suggesting a traditional, almost folk song-like quality, leading to a sense of timelessness and universality to the speaker's story. This is a tale that's been told many, many times over many generations, and the idea of a story being sung from one maid to the next reinforces that sense of tradition. The mirrored phrasing here in this stanza mimics the repetitive thoughts of someone grappling with trauma or betrayal. Now we move to the middle. The speaker confronts Kate directly using repetition for emphasis. "Oh, Lady Kate, my cousin Kate." The word lady signals Kate's new elevated social status, likely through marriage to this lord. The word fair, "you grew more fair than I," not only refers to physical beauty, but also connotes moral purity, which Victorian society equated with female virtue. The speaker admits Kate's increased attractiveness, which could reflect on self-deprecation or resigned acknowledgement. The emphasis on the brutal replacement of the speaker with her cousin is exaggerated in stanza through, as the speaker is cast by. The phrase mirrors the commodity of being discarded, reinforcing themes of female objectification, as if this speaker has just been passed on like an object that's been replaced for a better model. The enjambment, which is when lines are broken up at the end of in the middle of each sentence, flows naturally like a spoken recollection, reinforcing the personal narrative tone. The poem, in short, then, sounds a bit like a nursery rhyme, something simple, something pure. We're then told by stanza 4 that because you were good and pure, this reflects Victorian ideals of feminine virtue and innocence, highly prized in women. The speaker acknowledges Kate's perceived moral superiority, which is socially rewarded. In short, Kate is seen as good and pure, and so much better than the cottage maiden that she is replacing. The phrase outcast thing is harsh and dehumanizing, emphasizing the speaker's social and moral exile. The repetition of call stresses that these are external labels imposed by society, highlighting the theme of social stigma. As you can see there, she is called an outcast thing, rather than thinking that of herself. The rhetorical question near the end interrupts the descriptive flow, prompting reflection, as the speaker, the cottage maiden, asks Kate, which of us has a tenderer heart? Asking Kate really to think about the kind of person she is and who deserves the Lord more. We move then to the last 2 stanzas. The writing in sand is temporary and easily erased, implying that Kate's love was shallow, fleeting, or insincere, which suggests that Kate's relationship lacks stability and permanence, perhaps unlike the cottage maiden, who really did genuinely love her lord. We then have the phrase spit into his face, which is bold and defiant and a gesture of contempt and refusal. The hand symbolises an offer of marriage or alliance. Refusal represents rejection of social expectations and male power. This woman then feels strongly enough to stand up against her lord and refuse to take his hand in marriage. The balance between softer emotional lines, "my love was true," and a harsh final couplet here emphasises the speaker's complex feelings of hurt and defiance. The gift, by the last stanza, suggests something valuable the speaker possesses that Kate lacks, in this case, the sun. The phrase, "seem not like to get," implies Kate is unlikely to ever gain this gift, emphasising its rarity and significance. The speaker then feels that Kate is unlikely ever to have a child of her own. The mystery around what this gift is invites the reader to infer deeper meaning, often interpreted as maternal love or emotional truth. The juxtaposition, "my shame, my pride," captures the complex Victorian attitudes towards illegitimacy. The child is a source of social disgrace, but also of deep love as well. This last stanza serves as a turning point or resolution where the speaker claims a form of victory or moral superiority against social stigma. In other words, our cottage maid has risen up against the Lord and is proving to him that she's going to stand her ground and ignore any further thoughts he has. Let's summarise the poem then in full. Who is the poem about? Cousin Kate is about a young woman who's seduced and abandoned by a wealthy lord who later chose her more socially acceptable cousin, Kate, as his wife. What is it about? In Cousin Kate, the speaker recounts how she was seduced and discarded by a rich lord who later married her cousin, Kate, for her purity and social standing. Despite her betrayal and loss, the speaker finds strength and sense in victory in having a child, something Kate does not have. And lastly, why was it written? The poem reflects Rossetti's criticism of gender inequality and the double standards faced by women regarding sexuality and social status. Now we've summarised the poem and looked in detail at some of the notes surrounding it. Let's take a look at 3 key quotes then that you can use in the exam. The first here, he wore me like a silken knot, he changed me like a glove, is from the earlier stanzas. Here are some notes around the outside. And please pause the video to make notes onto perhaps your cue cards ready for revision. And quote number 2. And lastly, quote number 3. I've tried to give you notes here that already analyse and examine the line, thinking about its effect on the reader, thereby linking to what the mark scheme suggests is a level 5 response. Now, as always in these videos, I tend to end the video with a sense of how to write up these notes, how to use these when actually analysing the poem in an exam. Today's focus then is writing about structure. Writing about structure in a poem means analysing how the poem is built, how its form, line length, stanza arrangement, rhyme, rhythm, and progression affect its meaning, tone, and impact. In short, everything that isn't simply the words the poet chooses to use. We're going to break down each one of these into what actually counts as form or rhythm or progression, with an example from Cousin Kate for each one. So first up, structure counts in terms of form. Think about what type of poem it is. Is it a sonnet, ballad, dramatic monologue? Is it regular or irregular in form? In other words, does it follow the rules of that form of writing? You can see an example there from Cousin Kate on the bottom. The second thing you might want to consider is stanza structure. How many stanzas are there? Are they all the same length? Does the stanza reflect or shift in tone or focus? Do you notice, such as in Cousin Kate, where different stanzas seem to focus on different ideas? You can also look at line length and enjambment. Are some of the lines long or short? Can you think why this might be? How do they link to the overall theme of the poem or topic? Enjambment often creates a conversational or emotional flow. The breaks in the lines are deliberately there to create meaning. Why would a line be cut off in the way that it is? Why would a line seem to rhyme with the one above or below it? What effect is being created here? 4. Rhyme scheme. Take a look at the ends of each line. Does it use a regular rhyme? Does it change at any point? In many poems, the rhyme scheme does not stay the same throughout. A regular rhyme scheme can suggest control or tradition or constraint. Irregularity, or a rhyme scheme that seems to change quite regularly, might also affect chaos or emotion, and how might that link to the main theme or ideas behind the poem? Rhyme or meter can also be important. Ask yourself if there's a regular beat, i.e. an iambic tetrameter. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. Do you notice a natural flow in the poem? Does this make it seem more natural or unnatural in some way? Is the poem quite predictable or safe in terms of its meaning or the way it is read out loud? How again does this link to the theme of the poem? Structural shifts, number 6. Are there changes in tone, perspective or argument? Is there a change of character, for example, halfway through? Do we suddenly notice there is a shift in tone, as if the speaker was speaking at a later date or has suddenly had a change of heart? Look for turning points, such as a rhetorical question, a shift from past to present, or a change in tone. All of these suggest something has developed in the poem or something has changed in the poem that you might want to comment on ready for the examiner. You can see the example once again from Cousin Kate. If we put all these ideas together then, linking to our Cousin Kate, this is what a structural paragraph might look like as I focus on the rhythm of the poem, the structure of the poem, and indeed the shifts in tone. Thank you very much then for listening to this poetry revision of Cousin Kate by Christina Rossetti. I'm Mr. McFloyd and thank you very much for listening.